Okay, here we go on the Monday. Our space is under construction. Hi, Janet Dwyer. A little bit of work, folks, so that's why you just get the audio version of The Chosen One, but that's quite all right. There's Janet Dwyer. Hi there, Lynn Miller. There's Lynn. Folks, it's the same show. We're just having some work done on the space. And so that's why it should be straightened out today. So then we'll return to our normal video. Tomorrow. There we go. Okay, hi there, Brenda. There's Garney. Folks, we're always trying different things. There we go. Brought to you by the Cohesive Inn. Yes, we are live, Lynn Miller. Yes, it is. Is it live? I'll give you a hint. It's 1:02 on Monday. Yes, good afternoon. There's Kara. I believe all of our audio. Yes, Tracy Montero. Again, having a little work done on the space. So no, you do not. Now, I am not hearing. I believe everything should be fine. And we're going to begin in just 3 minutes. So, folks, as you know, we constantly try new things. This is one of them. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not surprised. I don't know. I did see that story. Not exactly shocked by it, but maybe I'll look into it. Roger says ready to go. Okay. That's all that matters. Yep. Let me check our... All right. Yep. Trying something a little different. I don't know who that is. KC lost. Oh, Kansas City lost. Yes. Yeah, and I couldn't, it's funny you mentioned that. I couldn't believe the number of people that were saying, the NFL is rigged. Watch how they're going to make sure the Chiefs win. Not so fast. Nope. I'll tell you, I think the Broncos are good. I think they're a team to watch. It was nice having a little bit of Sunday free since the Patriots were not playing. Yes. It's a windy day, isn't it? Yes. All right, we're going to begin in just 1 minute. 1 minute. Yes, there's Debbie. Yep. So, folks, it's the same program. It's just audio. Again, I'm repairing something where we broadcast, and we should be good to go and all set for tomorrow. That's right. Back it up, Mahomes. Yes. There's some of our YouTube friends and family. And we're going to begin in just 1 minute on this Monday, November 17th. Bring you up to speed on everything. They now have the coffee at Cohesive, which is nice. All right, we're going to begin, folks. 106 on this Monday. Again, no need to adjust your screen. You're only seeing audio, but we're actually experimenting with it, having some work done on the space. So you're just going to get the audio version of me today, but we are going to talk to Justin Katz. And, Tracy, I know you're trying to be funny, but that's how then, like, bad, stupid rumors start. So I know you're just trying to be funny and you're a valued follower, but I don't understand. People don't realize people see that and that's going to show up somewhere. No, that is not the case. So um, I try to be a good sport about it. Folks, this portion of our program, check out depetro.com. Yeah, but Tracy, nobody understands that that's a joke. Don't you understand that? Do you know how many times we have to post, even if I post something is happening here in Pawtucket, what do people put? Where is this? You can't, oh my goodness. The hour is ruined. This portion of the program, now we're live on AM 1380 and 99.9 FM. You can always listen online at our website, depetro.com. And then we are live on Facebook and X and YouTube. So, but this portion of the program brought to you by the Coesit Inn, 226 Coesit Avenue, West Warwick. Lunch, dinner, drinks in the lounge. They're waiting for you at the Coesit Inn, and now they have the coffee at Coesit at the Coesit Inn. We're doing some construction on the space. I thought we would just do the audio, and now all of a sudden it starts to appear online that I'm having some work done. And that's obviously not the case. And if that was the case, then that's a really long time. But that's how that stuff just starts to take off. I don't understand, but that's just the way it works. And so we'll talk to Justin coming up as the year has now gone out of the program. I'm having work done, so it's just audio, but then you have to deal with this type of stuff. So we'll just try to make it through the hour. I get it. People say, "Oh, just joking." Well, if you haven't learned by now, that's just not the way things work. So I'll be sure to go live later so people can see that that is not the case. So, sometimes things go wrong on a Monday, and then, and then you think you're just going to adjust to something, and then people find a way to make it actually go worse than you thought it could. This portion of the program, folks, brought to you by Propane Plus. Call them today, 401-885-4209, or in Massachusetts, 508-252-3359 for Propane Plus. For all your heating and cooling, residential or commercial, you can depend on Propane Plus. 401-885-4209. All right, folks, we do a segment each Monday at this time. Now, he can show, actually. The only reason I don't have a visual up is simply because we're working on something with the space. He's welcome to, unless we're both going to be that way. All right. It is our segment this week. Joining us is Justin Katz, managing editor of anchorrising.com. And Justin, I want to start off. We have a lot to talk about this afternoon with our segment, but I'd like to start off and just get your thoughts on John Laughlin. John Laughlin was a state rep, and John Laughlin in 2010 ran a very successful, well-respected effort against then, it was the open seat for Patrick Kennedy. It was the CD1 seat, Congressional District 1. John Laughlin was the Republican. He faced off after David Cicilline won the primary. What was so interesting about that was in a debate, the media allowed Cicilline to lie about the finances of the state, and then he did win. And then we found out, that famous line. Then Mayor Angel Tavares said we were expecting a Category 3 hurricane. We got a Category 5 hurricane, but then Cicilline stayed in the seat. Well, John Laughlin, since then, became a talk show host, fill-in, and then mostly on the weekend. And he has now announced that he is going to run for lieutenant governor. Let's talk about it. What are your initial thoughts on it, Justin?
Well, I'm recalling, like you, his campaign, and John, I thought ran a great campaign. He had some events that were by today's standards, were hugely attended. Of course, that was somewhat during the Tea Party days, so there was a built-in momentum there. But that makes me, it's been a while since he ran, and that's not to say he won't have any ideas or skills to do so. But I wonder if the game has changed a bit. So he'll have to be kind of prepared for that. I mean, that his loss of that congressional seat was sort of like one of the early indications of Republicans' inability, because of structural reasons, to win anymore. I mean, and obviously that was pre-mail ballots and all that. So I think he's got arguably more campaign experience than almost any other Republican in Rhode Island, having been a state rep and run for Congress. He'll need to, though, be prepared for the new environment that he's entering.
When you say the new environment, expand on that a little bit, Justin, because as I step back, here are some positives that I see, and I don't take what you're saying as a negative, but
Mm-hmm.
some positives with John Laughlin. Number one, he has run and won. He was the elected rep for that district, which, by the way, if you remember, he was then replaced by Dan Gordon, who that guy ran into tremendous problems, and then I think he had to resign. But he had run, people knew who he was, and since then, I would say I consider him, of all the people out there, he's pretty media savvy as far as he can conduct himself in an interview. He's been on television, obviously spent a lot of time, behind the microphone on the radio. So I think with that, I think he's got that down. Um, he certainly has built his name recognition. He did also, I thought he had some job with the Veterans Administration. I
Yes, it did.
think so. I'm not exactly sure, but obviously, the military background. But what types of challenges do you think he might run into?
Well, I agree with you. I mean, he was a good speaker even when he ran, and he's been on the radio ever since. So that's kept his
Yes.
chops up, I'm sure. He's got a great sense of humor, and even back then, he had it when he was a representative. He was able to talk across the aisle and work with people and gain support in that way. But what I'm speaking of generally, though, I mean, when I look back, say the year 2000, when I really started paying attention to politics in Rhode Island, I mean, we had a Republican president, a Republican governor, a Republican senator. We had just had a Republican lieutenant governor and attorney general, and so Republicans were part of the political bloodstream at that point. And about the time of Obama, Cicilline, and also John Laughlin's congressional race, that fell away for no reason of John Laughlin's or any Republicans, as far as I'm concerned, but because the Democrats kind of locked things in around here. The attitude of a lot of Democrat voters changed. They used to say, "I vote the person." That they just sort of gave that up around that time, I think. And so that's kind of the environment he's entering into, and there is some polarization, particularly among Democrats. You're not. There's no more vote the person. It's going to be, do you support President Trump? Do you support this? Do you want them to release the Epstein files? I'm running for lieutenant governor. I don't care about the Epstein files. It's not going to be an adequate response to a lot of people in the state. And so it's going to take a different kind of strategy. And I think John's got a lot of advantages in experience and personality, but he'll have to do some work to figure out how to make that fit in the current environment.
Well, as Dan McGowan writes of the Boston Globe in his roadmap this morning, in 2010, there were fewer than 5,800 mail ballots cast. And then he writes, there's a good chance nearly 100,000 people will vote early, in person, or by mail in next year's lieutenant governor's race. Justin, to me, that is the 800-pound gorilla that the Rhode Island Republican Party, to me, until they take that seriously and curb that, like when we think about it, no one was saying that the 2010 congressional race was an illegitimate election. And there were 5,800 mail ballots cast. There's, to me, the system, and I believe you and I have talked about this more than anyone, the system is clearly broken. That how did we go from 5,800 mail ballots cast to now there could be over 100,000 cast next year?
Yeah, well, I mean that's a big issue. One thing I've begun looking at recently at the town level and the state level is the gap between Republicans and Democrats, their registration and their turnout. And even if Republicans got 100% of their voters to turn out, it doesn't match the actual turnout for Democrats. So Democrats have they can, even if Democrats have an average year of turnout and Republicans get 100% out, they still won't beat Democrats on a Democrat line, or on just partisan lines. But so you need the unaffiliated voters, and frankly, I'm starting to wonder with the mail ballots. I haven't gotten this deep into it yet, but there was a big jump in unaffiliated registrations in the last election, and Kamala Harris did better versus relied more on unaffiliated voters, let's say, than Joe Biden did in 2020. So uh, there there's that kind of lingering feeling of fraud. But so Republicans need to up their mail ballot game for sure. But even if they do that among their own, it's not going to be enough. And I think that's going to be a big challenge.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. Now, Justin, also, um, we first heard about this Vic Meller, who Kathy Gregg, for whatever reason, he gave an interview to Kathy Gregg, and he would like to challenge, or he's looking at challenging Seth Magaziner. Well, what someone like that doesn't understand, and again, he's was in Florida, he's moving back to Rhode Island. We had talked about he's friends with General Flynn. He talked about being at the Capitol on January 6th. But with someone like that, to me, because I know someone that has been dealing with him, and that person told him, do not do an interview with Kathy Gregg. He ignored it, and doesn't realize that as much as someone may say, well, a lot of people don't read the journal. Well, you and I both know, well, a lot of people in the media follow her on X. And so if you give an interview to her, it's not, that so many people are reading about it. It's giving her, she's now kind of in the driver's seat with this because she has access to him. And she's done a follow-up on the interview, and there's more revelations coming out. I'd like to kind of get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, one thing I'll say is the Providence Journal on a page of her article, a recent one, has a little video clip of from USA Today interviewing Mr. Miller, and I thought he did really well, and I was pumping the fist in the air for his when he was asked about right wing extremism, and he says, I don't know what you mean. When I go to events, it's mothers and fathers trying to secure their rights. I don't see extremists. I mean, he's very on point and strong there. But what we're starting to see is this problem, and I blame it on the structural issues of the Rhode Island Republicans, because there's no barrier between jumping into politics here and running for the highest offices, whether you're talking governor or Congress or Senate. If you're on the Republican side, you got a smooth lane, especially if you can do some self-financing. And so I think that's what we see. We see him jumping in, and what people need to remember about politics is, what fair or not, you have kind of political expenditures and political advantages, and you have to pay attention to your expenditures. And what I mean here, he's just returned to the state, so it's not like he's been around cultivating relationships and people are going to, there's the carpetbagger image. He's got the Michael Flynn, he's got January 6th. Both of those, I'm with him, and I would defend him on both counts. His affiliation with Flynn, whom I've defended, and also January 6th. And now you throwing in revelations about domestic abuse arrests or accusations in both Rhode Island and Florida. It's 30 years ago, and his campaign is rightly saying, well, that's a long time, and he's moved on and he's matured. Yeah, that's all great, but it's another political expenditure. It's another thing counting against him. And I wish there would be more consideration, especially I believe he's hired professional advisors, people saying, look, you've got a lot of baggage here. We're with you. It's all defensible, but it starts to add up. And I think that's going to play into the hands of, say, Kathy Gregg. She loves this kind of stuff. And whether or not people read the journal, it's all online now. It's all on social media. And so anybody who cares, who wants to look into it, is going to find this stuff, and he's going to have to defend it. And some, maybe even worse, other Republicans on the ballot are going to be asked to defend it too. And that's, I mean, fair enough if weren't so many expenditures, but he's starting to generate a bit of a problem for himself and I think other Republicans.
Now, I think it's Steve Scoley. He was looking at the seat, Justin.
Mhm.
Um, Based on today's Providence Journal, if Dr. Scoley was thinking of running, I still think he should. And what is interesting about the Providence Journal was when he first met with her, he didn't mention his arrest in Florida. And then, so now you're giving her something. How come you didn't mention that the first time? And granted, it was in 1998. And yes, that is a long time ago. But we're talking, the incident in Florida is someone is talking about grabbed by the throat, punched her with a closed fist, dried blood around her nose. So, my question for you, he says I'm a different person now. I moved on, and I think that is terrific. But is that something? Let's be real here. Based on those allegations from the Florida arrest report, does that sound like someone in your mind who, in fact, could get elected running for Congress in Rhode Island?
Well, apart from behavior, or because I'll take him at his word, and I hope he's reformed himself, so to speak, and changed for the better. And people do turn out well and find their way to better life. But as I've said, it's kind of it's a political expenditure. He's got to be able to justify it. If somebody came forward and they were the ideal candidate in every way, they had the experience, everybody loved them, and then there was this thing in their distant past that they had to get people to excuse, I think that's plausible. But he's just got so many things he's got to overcome for a Rhode Island audience that I it seems to me insurmountable. I don't think you can really come back from that. And with regard to Dr. Scoley, who I believe is inching closer and closer to announcing a run, the trap for him is going to be to not jump in and pile on and get caught up in a Republican on Republican fight. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the local media, folks like Kathy Gregg, respond to Stephen Scoley, because he was sued the state over mask mandates, and he became kind of and he's been involved with the Center for Freedom and Prosperity for years, so he's on their list of right wing crazies, as far as say the Kathy Greggs of Rhode Island are concerned. It'll be interesting to see though whether they treat him as a more, let's say, respectable figure in contrast, or if they just try to pit the two of them against each other for the fun of progressive audiences. That'll be interesting to watch, but it's going to take some consideration on both their parts.
Yeah, I think I mean we just saw what happened with Craven, and he's a Democrat.
Yeah.
And suddenly he's going for attorney general, and I believe he thought he had that expunged. Maybe it was expunged. This guy, he's a total unknown, and to me, this is one of the dangers. He was told not to sit down and do an interview with Kathy Gregg. He ignored that. He did an interview with Kathy Gregg, and now, she's got her claws into him. Now, Justin, last week, it was in Warren, where there was some ICE vehicles, and then they got a suspect or a subject they were looking for, apparently working at Blount Seafood. And then Representative Jason Knight, who also he's running for attorney general. He put this blistering statement condemning President Trump, condemning ICE, saying, scaring people in Warren. We've learned since that this was someone who was supposed to be deported in 2009. He's from Liberia. He has a slew of criminal charges on him. I haven't heard any follow-up with the media, or I haven't seen Jason Knight put up any follow-up. But just what are your thoughts on that?
I think this incident is showing kind of a habitual lack of integrity and recklessness in Rhode Island. I mean, Jason Knight for sure. I mean, you want to be the attorney general and you're jumping in, making all kinds of assumptions. He had no idea. Basically, as far as I can tell, he was paying attention to the apps that tell people where to go to protest ICE when something's happening, and based on that alone. So the very fact that he had no idea when he put out that statement, whether it was, I mean, it turned out there were it was a deportation order and some criminal issues for this particular illegal immigrant. It could have been worse. It could have been like a serial killer for all he knew. But he's just so irresponsible. He didn't care. He jumped right in. And frankly, it goes to the media too. The WPRI story on the Warren incident was quoting activists as if they were legitimate eyewitnesses. One of them said that there was just happened to be a car there with tires slashed. It maybe had nothing to do with it, but one of the activists said, "Oh, presumably ice splashed the guy's tires, so he couldn't get away." And WPRI just reported it. It's mind blowing. That's not news. That's just activism. And so we're seeing a whole lot of that. And I think the fact that it turned out to be a criminal, really, and I think it's Kathy Gregg on social media kind of downplaying. Oh, there have been no criminal charges since 2012 in
Right.
Rhode Island. Like, well, what? So you see this sliding goalpost where you start to understand the game they're playing. It's, oh well, we all support deporting the criminals. Well, maybe if it hasn't been a crime recently. Well, maybe, stealing isn't really a crime. Well, so what? They roughed up their neighbor a little bit. Everybody does that. That's not a crime. Let them stay. That's the game they're playing, and it's just so irresponsible. I wish we had, kind of some on a Democrat and mainstream media side, somebody saying, "Hey, folks, let's take a breath here. We can't always be the radical blue-haired activists on everything. Sometimes you've actually got to enforce the law, especially when it harms your own working communities when these things get out of hand as they have."
Yeah, I couldn't believe the Kathy Gregg comment, Justin, simply because, listen, ICE is a national organization, much like FBI, ATF, IRS, Homeland Security. This business of he hasn't committed a crime in Rhode Island since 2012. It's irrelevant. Can you imagine if the FBI went and grabbed someone, and then, so as a reporter, is she going to start saying he hasn't committed a crime in Rhode Island? Right. That's why it's the FBI, and that's why they get people that are wanted in other states, as do Homeland Security, IRS. Just my thought on that, it was maddening to see, was the parochial attitude. And this is supposed to be the prominent journal reporter. Well, he hasn't committed a crime in Rhode Island since 2012. Why is that even relevant? So in other words, he could commit homicide in another state, but as long as he's not doing anything in Rhode Island, so many of them, by the way, they may live in Fall River. They may not know exactly where they live. It's not that far if they live in Mass and then they commute over the line to work in a place like in Warren or Bristol or even Newport for that matter. But just the parochial attitude, as if ICE was wrong because he hasn't committed a crime in Rhode Island since 2012. They ignore the fact that guy was supposed to be deported in 2009. Now, Justin, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your thought on the DOT hearing last week. Zach Kuna, front and center, and DOT Director Peter Alviti up there.
Well, for the most part, it wasn't much different than we would expect. Although we did get somewhat of a revelation that the entire agency is just a project management shop, as Alviti called it. They've got contractors reviewing contractors, which in a way is okay if it's working. But at some point, the only if we're going to do these things through government, somebody in government has to be accountable, and that's really all there is to it. I mean, another big revelation is that nobody in the DOT is apparently competent or has the expertise to review the reports they're getting on safety, and so that's a problem. If you're not running, if you're not actually on a job, if you're not an engineer, that's okay. Then you still need to be able to review the reports, and that's what blows my mind about the whole thing. Other than that, though, it's amazing to me that this kind of dog and pony show gets to keep going without any accountability whatsoever.
Yeah, a couple things about it. I didn't like actually how he was the only one there. I mean, you have some other key players, starting with Igliosi, who's the legal person. Starting with, there's at least two other people that I've identified that should have been there. I don't think it should have just been Director Alviti alone. I almost got it. It came across to me that for whatever reason, they feel confident that because he does that, ask the DOT fluff segment down the dial that somehow he was going to be prepared for this. Justin, it was extraordinary to hear that they hire someone to do the work. They hire someone else supposedly to check the work, that if neither one do it properly, they have no mechanism to check it. What I also couldn't understand, first of all, I think Zach Kuna did a great job, but why would we think, when they kept mentioning 300, 350 other projects, well, why would they think that they're all fine when they've obviously just proven they don't have the proper mechanism to know whether or not that it's doing fine? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That, not to give a good analogy, but it's almost like you hire someone to paint your house. You don't know whether they painted it, whether they painted it the right color, whether they painted all of it, whether they used the right type of paint. You hire someone else supposedly to check the work. I'm trying to figure out why, if that's the system they have, in other words, you don't even need engineers and others. All you need is someone that's hiring consultants, and that doesn't make sense to me.
Right. Well, I mean, that could be fine if you had the internal project management mechanisms and at least enough experience to be able to review it. Again, the accountability has to come back to somebody in the state government, whether they're an engineer or not. And some of the cuteness of it, the reports had the picture of a broken pin, but it wasn't written up in the report, and so that's why we're suing. Right? That's why, because we shouldn't have to look at the pictures. It's like they probably never actually looked at it. I mean, they said, "All right, thank you for this report," and they put it aside. And then another contractor looked at it and they put that aside. But as you point out, how can we trust that any of the other bridges aren't about to go? We there's no way we can trust that. And then at the laughable toward the beginning, the laughable fact that Alviti didn't know the name of the project manager who was in charge of bridges. I mean, just I mean, did you not expect a question like that? How could you walk into this hearing and not have said, "Oh, give me to somebody in your office, give me a list of all the people I need to be able to name." Just something simple. I mean, any interview I do, I have a list of all the people relevant to the story that I can think of, and
Sure.
so on and so forth. And that he wouldn't even do that, it's almost like a statement of contempt against the people of Rhode Island. I don't even have to prepare for this. I'm just going to go in and wing it, is the impression that gives.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that that's the system. Again, though, I don't know who made the ultimate call to just have him. I don't think we were properly served, because I would like to have heard some of those other people. Igliosi, he's
Yep.
the legal and chief of staff. He's been there the whole time. He was going to run for attorney general. He even had a fundraiser the night that they closed the Washington Bridge. So, and he gets to go this whole time. It doesn't have to say anything, and he's the legal person. I didn't like the format of the whole thing. I think it is a different dynamic when they put him under oath. And I thought Zach Kuna was very impressive. I hope he ends up maybe looking at running for attorney general. I think I think he's very talented, actually, and that wasn't easy. And and he also had to abide by what the legislators wanted and so forth. So I thought that wasn't easy. Folks, it's time for Katz's Corner. This is a story that Justin Katz has found. And what do you have this week, Justin?
So I'm hearing more and more from across the state, people interested in property rights in Rhode Island. I think with the push for affordable housing, and there's been a few eminent domain cases in towns here and there, people are starting to perk up to that. And so just to start getting back into understanding the players here, I took a look at Grow Smart Rhode Island, which is basically roughly a $500,000 organization. Most of the funding is obscure. Some of it comes from the state government, but the rest of it just comes from whoever is out there, and they use all kinds of flowery words to talk about how they're going to control you and tell you what to do with your property, and then you get to live in their utopia. So I started digging into them again. It's probably going to be the start of more and more articles about property rights we'll have on Anchor Rising, but it'd be a good place to get a start.
Folks, check it out on anchorrising.com. He is Justin Katz, managing editor of anchorrising.com, our segment Politics this week. Justin, excellent job as always, and we'll talk to you again.
Thank you, John. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Folks, there it is. Now, again, I mentioned it earlier to start. Apparently, some people didn't hear it. I'm having some work done. It should just take one day. work done on our background, and that's why it's just audio today. So people saying I don't see any pictures. I guess sometimes I do underestimate how much people do depend on the video, but we should have it. I could have done it, but there was like a hanging wire, and I thought we'll just do audio today, but we will get that straightened out. Folks, this portion of our program brought to you by J. Perry Paving. Call them today, free estimate. The clock is ticking down as far as if you want to get it done. The clock is ticking between now. You really could do it this month, next month, and then they shut down for January, February. 401 732 1730. Free estimate, J. Perry Paving. 401 732 1730. And remember, no one is better with veterans or for veterans than J. Perry Paving. 401 732 1730. Letter J. J. Perry Paving. And it makes a huge difference. And maybe you're thinking of doing it, and then maybe you convince your someone of your neighbors to also do it. Now we're talking about 2 driveways on the street. And remember, no one's better at veterans. They have a great package for veterans. Contact J. Perry Paving today, 401 732 1730 for J. Perry Paving. I also want to mention Kids Club on the Pike. Kids Club on the Pike. Don't forget birthday parties, before and after school programs, preschool programs. It's a good option. If you're a parent or a grandparent and you're looking for options, Kids Club on the Pike. Contact them today. Now, they also have a Warwick location. So you have right on Plainfield Pike off of 295 on the Cranston-Johnston line, and then you have the Warwick location. Kids Club on the Pike. Transportation before and after care for school-age children ages 5 through 12. Preschool, half and full day program, preschool children 3 through 5, and also perfect for a birthday party venue. It's Kids Club on the Pike, 401 443 5336. Now, folks, good afternoon. We are also adjusting some of our programming because of the weather. I saw someone mention earlier about the individual in Providence who was apparently taking money, stealing money out of the meters. So I didn't, I want to just quickly check that. And then, yeah, there it is. Providence Public Works employee. Police department said a Department of Works employee stealing parking meter funds. Department of Public Works taken into custody after investigation. They identified him as 45-year-old Christopher Stetson. He's charged 3 counts of embezzlement, 3 counts of larceny, 3 counts driving without the consent of the owner. He was removing coins from several meters. Search warrant of his home also revealed a large quantity of coins. So that's a worker. You know, there was a bad crash. This is interesting because one of our followers mentioned this to me, and it had to do with there was a bad accident. Rhode Island State Police said 2 people were killed in a crash on 95 late Saturday night. It was close to midnight, I believe, and I don't remember if it was raining. It was raining. Mile 23 reports from a vehicle veered off the roadway into the tree line. Found a silver Toyota lost control, struck a tree. 6 people were trapped inside the vehicle, had to be extricated. State police said 19-year-old Ayana Vok of Hartford, Connecticut, was pronounced dead at the scene. Another passenger, 19-year-old Asha Jules of New London, Connecticut, was pronounced dead at the scene. The 4 others were taken to Rhode Island Hospital. Crash remains under investigation. You know, I don't know why these people were in Connecticut from in Rhode Island from Connecticut. That 2 killed in the fatal crash. Now, Saturday night, that was heavy rain, and it was, I'm going to guess, hold on, I actually have when it was, because we have a great, one of our, who was that picked up on that? And that was, let's see, it was one of our, I know one of our people, it was Maryland. Yep. Exit 8, Warwick, West Warwick, East Greenwich responded. So that crash happened at, let's see, it was right around midnight. Yep. So that was a fatal crash. Folks, I don't understand when, when you can't, you're supposed to slow down your speed. Now, again, they're young and not sure why they are in Rhode Island, but in Rhode Island from Connecticut, midnight, it's raining very, very heavy. Vehicles are hydroplaning, and then you have a situation like that, which is just tragic, as a matter of fact. But I also want to touch on, it is, November is still sweeps month for local TV news, and I saw that Tim White of Channel 12 is doing a 4-part, I think it's 4 parts of the evening news, The Last Dawn. Louis Monacchio, holy cow. Organized crime is, long left the building, so to speak. The Last Dawn, the story of Louis Monacchio. Now, that said, I will still watch it, and I'm not knocking Tim White, but you got to go back in the vault to get that type of stuff. He was still present and active. Let's see, more like 15 years ago. Yeah, 15 years ago. 15 years ago was then when they got ratted out and he was arrested. But I was just laughing when I saw it, like, oh my goodness, we're still doing the organized crime stories. And I think it's a 4-part miniseries on Channel 12. The Last Dawn, Louis Monacchio. I mean, I'll probably end up watching it, and I'm not knocking Tim. I'm sure they put a lot of effort into it, and I recognize some of the people that they included. I was just kind of laughing because he's really the only one left trying to follow that stuff. Some of the guys that were involved with organized crime, they had a little bit of a renaissance a couple of years ago when Crime Town was out. Then it's just going quiet, and now here we go with maybe people that still watch The Sopranos or watch Black Mass or The Departed or things like that, and then suddenly, boom, there it is, The Last Dawn. So I'll definitely watch some of that. Yeah, Channel 12. I know. I mean, it's just I couldn't believe actually I was seeing that. Like, oh my goodness, here we go again. Yep, he used to sit right there. I used to. Once in a while, I'd see him up on the hill. I'm not even sure he's alive. I don't think he's alive anymore. He used to live, I think he lived above, there was a laundromat right on Lower Atwells Avenue as you're going down right at the bottom of the hill, where then it's near Harris Avenue. Pretty sure he lived above a laundromat that was over there. I'm not sure anymore. Folks, this portion of the program, The Last Dawn, is brought to you by ServPro. ServPro of Providence. Fast, thorough, professional. Call ServPro of Providence. If you ever have water damage or smoke damage, or maybe you have fire damage, ServPro of Providence, 401-941 5500. When disaster strikes, and listen, if you have a fire in your business, that's a disaster. If you have a fire, you're going to have water damage because they need to put the fire out. If you have a fire, you're going to have smoke damage. If you have water damage, there's a very good chance you could have mold. ServPro of Providence. Call them, especially if you're a business owner. 401 941 5500. Fast, thorough, professional. Serve Pro of Providence. 401 941 5500. Now, in regards to, I think we're going to be covering the Brian Walsh trial, which I believe is going to start. I believe it's now scheduled to start the Monday after Thanksgiving. We're probably going to cover that. There's also a story online that some of the witnesses that were accused in the Karen Reed trial, that they're looking to take legal action against her and her little former pet. Let's wait and see how that plays out. So I haven't posted on that in a while. I posted on it on X this morning, and immediately I admit I get frustrated by people that can't follow a simple story. So the Boston Globe story says that notably absent, that Karen Reed is not going after Colin Albert. And I mentioned that. And then someone put a comment, well, I think he'll go after her on his own. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about she doesn't mention him in this wrongful death. She went after him in the first trial. And then when they learned that they could prove that he wasn't on the street at the same time as John O'Keefe, they removed him and didn't go after him in the second trial because they had no evidence for that. So the story about it that appeared on Boston.com was saying that notably absent from Karen Reed going after witnesses is she doesn't go after Colin Albert. And immediately after I post that, someone's like, well, I think he's going to go after her. That's not what we're talking about. Not what we're talking about. So let's wait and see how that plays out. I think the story's also a little confusing, and I don't want to get in the weeds of it because at this point, if you even talk about it, it's akin to literally going down into the sewer. It is. So that's got a long way to go. And the person that put that comment, it immediately reminded me that people, number one, don't read, and number two, can't follow a story. The Boston Globe, or Boston.com, I should say, admittedly, they had a line in there that was confusing, that should have been explained properly, but I don't know how it was written, and I don't know how it was edited. Because the way it was written, it said, and actually I could read it directly, that he was not, and part of me says, I can't believe I'm going back down this, but Karen Reed case, Alberts, McCabe's, Higgins, defamation claims against Reed and her little former pet, who she's not even talking to anymore, who secretly recorded her. Let me get to the part. I didn't find this. It could have been, again, I know the writer, the reporter. She's good, Abby Patinkin. And I don't, it could have been edited the way that she wrote this story about it, which was, let's see, Reed seeking to combine her conspiracy civil rights claims with the wrongful death suit for efficiency's sake, but a judge is yet to rule in the request. The Alberts, McCabe's, Higgins are asking her motion be denied and her claims filed in a separate case. So let me just get to the part. Boom, boom, boom. Noticeably absent from the opposition brief is the nephew, Colin Albert. So, and she writes in the Boston.com story, it says, who was also present at 34 Fairview Road the night O'Keefe died. But what's missing is he never crossed paths with John. That came out in the trial. the Boston.com story goes on to say, while Reed previously sought to implicate Colin Albert in her third-party culprit theory, she has not named him in her civil conspiracy claims. I repeat, she has not named him in her civil conspiracy claims. She did name the other people that were in the house. So as I was posting exactly from the Boston.com article, notably absent from the Reed brief is Colin Albert. She has not named him in her civil conspiracy claims. So there's no reason for him to be part of that. But anyhow, we're going to wait. I know. We'll wait to see how that plays out. I have to, I don't know. I know there's a wrongful death hearing this Friday. I have to, I don't know. I have to decide if I want. I think that's a long way to go. I believe they've said the wrongful death, that whole action, it's possible nothing happens until 27, meaning 2027. It's still 2025. Sounds like a long way to go. But this is the first time that we are hearing that several of the witnesses now are looking to take action and in the headline. And by the way, this whole business of Alberts, McCabe's, Higginson defamation claims against Reed and I mean, what she does not want to do, Karen Reed does not want to be linked with her former little pet turtle. She does not. They don't talk anymore. He apparently recorded her without her knowledge. She's not communicating with him. She won't do an interview. She's made it very clear she doesn't want to be linked in. It's very possible the two of them get linked in. I don't know. There's so much of this. I can't. I know some people just continue to relive it like every day. I cannot. There's other stories to follow. Let's see whether or not, in fact, she gets linked on it. But I also want to just mention this notion that somehow everything is covered by freedom of speech. I mean, that is, that's ludicrous. And there's different examples of that. If you go after someone and harass them and you're trying to get them to not testify, that you can't claim freedom of speech. That's why they have witness intimidation rules. In this business of everything is freedom of speech, you can't defame people. You can't slander people. If everything was protected by freedom of speech, then there would be no, laws of slander or they wouldn't exist. They do exist. Why do they exist? Because that's not an absolute right. One of the best examples that I frequently mention is Sandy Hook. And ask Alex Jones. Ask Alex Jones how it worked out with Sandy Hook claiming he had freedom of speech. Ask him how that worked out now that he has completely lost his InfoWars media empire. Oh, that's right. You can't just make things up. Remember, the speech is free. You have to pay for the lies. Right? Nick Sandman, how did that work out? That was the young kid who then, sued CNN and so forth. Kyle Rettenberg, who also sued the media portraying him. How did that work out for the media in those cases? Not too well is the answer. Not too well. So, but ask Alex Jones, how did that work out? Your defense of Sandy Hook, that it was all a hoax. How'd that play out in court? I think to the tune of $1 billion. Alex Jones was ready to settle. He would have paid $50 million to try to get out of it. At one point, Alex Jones and InfoWars, they were, I think, doing like close to $800,000 a day in making money off their website and supplements and all this other stuff. Well, you figure that into the course of a year, 365 days a year. I mean, you're talking about he was pulling in at one point, maybe close to between 250 to 300 million. He doesn't have it now. Now it's, he's bankrupt and they took it from him. But he was arguing freedom of speech. He was arguing, hey, that's what I believe. I believe was all fake. Again, he did enjoy freedom of speech. He had to pay for the lies that they were all crisis actors. So there is accountability with that. Again, I wanted to mention it. It was in the news. I'm not going to go. Let's wait and see if anything comes of that. But the Brian Walsh case, that looks like that's in motion. That should start the Monday after Thanksgiving. And unless there's I'm anxious to see what defense he puts up, because they certainly seem to have, they don't have her body. They don't have the body of Anna Walsh, but they have a lot of circumstantial evidence. And she's never surfaced. If she's alive, where is she? What is she, underground, hiding? I don't think so. No, I think, but we'll follow it. That is a high profile case. Folks, remember, get that garage epoxied with quality asphalt seal coating. Call them today. Quality asphalt seal coating. Call them 401-283-9815. Before the season is over, get your garage epoxied with quality asphalt seal coating. Call Corey. They epoxy garages and patios, decorative concrete flooring. Call them. Request a free quote, free estimate, 401-283-9815, 401-283-9815 for quality asphalt seal coating. No, you can't just make things up. Reverend Al Sharpton, how did that work out for him in the Tawana Brawley case? Reverend Al Sharpton, this goes back, yes, he did. Yes, he did nail himself. The parents of the victims saying they were crisis actors, all a hoax. How'd that work out for him? What about his freedom of speech? Reverend Al Sharpton, he was saying Tawana Brawley was kidnapped by New York police and held against her will and sexually assaulted and blah, blah, blah. And Reverend Al Sharpton kept saying, I believe that to be the truth. How did that work out for him? Oh, that's right. He was sued millions and they took most of his money. Not too well. Yeah. Alex Jones, he had freedom of speech. Watch that. There's a good HBO documentary on it where he was saying, I believe that to be the truth. And the judge said, just because you believe it doesn't mean it's true. You believe everything you say is true. All right, folks, thank you. We will have our video straightened out for tomorrow. Thank you to Justin Katz, managing editor, anchorrising.com. If you're listening to the radio, stay tuned for the 2 o'clock news.